Welcome to the second video in your Introduction to Project Management subject. In this video, we will discuss what project management is and what the project lifecycle consists of, as well as consider what leadership style might be the most effective as a project manager. So let's get started. What is project management? The process of planning, implementing, and closing a temporary endeavor to achieve a specific result. That's the definition we use for project management. Let's dissect this a little bit. So project management first is planning. So all the stages it takes before you actually start doing something, as well as implementing the doing of the project and then closing out the project. Some of you may have contributed to a project at these different stages, but perhaps you haven't yet managed a complete project yet. Others of you may, again, be an expert project manager. So the process of planning, implementing, and closing a temporary endeavor. This part is important because this helps us define how a project is different from a program or a portfolio. A project is a temporary endeavor. So it's one single endeavor that has a specific end date. Now, if you are a program manager or a portfolio manager, perhaps you are managing multiple projects with multiple end dates, or some projects or programs that don't yet have an end date. So when we specifically talk about project management, we mean something with a very clear end date. So then in our definition, we do all of this to achieve a specific result. As we talked about in orientation, of course, knowing what result you have in mind, like you did with the visioning exercise with Les at orientation, that is essential to project management. You are planning, implementing, and closing in order to achieve a very specific result. So many of you can identify with all of this, so let's dive in a little bit deeper. So let's talk a little bit about the project life cycle. Every single project has a life cycle, and it consists of multiple phases. This is one model that we can use to visualize a life cycle, though you may have your own models that you use at work, and we encourage you to share those with others. So the first stage in the life cycle is the initiating and assessing stage. So this is really where, if you have experience with this, where you would conduct a needs assessment. So you would look at your community and you would assess where are the gaps in the community for where we want to go. For example, if you do recycling work, you may notice that there's a huge gap in recycling bins. You want to get your community to a place where everyone has an option of recycling. So you'll assess the environment and understand what the limitations are to have your community start recycling more. That's the initiation and assessing phase, where you also start to look at the planning stage. Moving into the planning stage, of course, this is when you take a look at what timeline, what budget, what staff, what resources, all of those factors that go into planning. We'll go over that in a moment. So then you move on to the implementing stage. The implementation stage is, of course, the doing. So this is after you've set forth your work plan in the planning stage. Now you're living out that work plan. You're following up with activities. Perhaps you are managing different staff members to see how the activities are being done. You're out in the community. You are making the project come to life. So that's, of course, the implementation stage. Now, the next two stages, although it looks like they go in a timeline, they go in a cycle, oftentimes, and we really encourage you to think this, oftentimes the measuring and sharing should be interlaced throughout all the other stages of the project. So measuring your project makes sure that you know how you will achieve success, of course. And then sharing is all about how you communicate your project progress and your project results. Those are usually considered the most essential in the final stage of your project lifecycle, which is the closeout period. This is often where we kind of more standardly think about sharing and measuring, because it's often when you have your program reports that you have to deliver to your donor or perhaps to your boss, to the CEO of your organization. But keep in mind that the sharing and measuring, we again really encourage you to think about how can you measure and how can you communicate effectively throughout the initiation phase, the planning stage, the implementing stage, and then the closeout stage of your project. So this is what is the project life cycle. And again, if you have other models of project life cycles, we encourage you to share that with the group in the forum. So let's talk about who is a project manager. Now, in the previous reflection, you may have identified yourself as a project manager, or you may have been a little bit unsure if you can technically call yourself a project manager. Well, everyone here has planned a project in their life before, whether or not you realized it or had a formal title at work as a project manager. Even becoming a CSP fellow is like managing a personal project. To get to this point of becoming a fellow, which is the result you wanted to achieve, you had to plan really, really well over a long period of time to reach the result of becoming a CSP fellow. You assessed the landscape in the initiation phase when you learned about CSP. You thought and you researched, what is this program? Would it be beneficial to me? Is it realistic for me? You learned all about the implementation process, and you followed a timeline. So then you planned, right? You learned what are the different deadlines and dates, what do you need to submit for your application, then you began implementation. You implemented that application, you then went through with your interviews, you dealt with a number of uncertainties, you assessed the risk for participating, you then actually participated in pre-departure orientation, and even if this is not your typical way of looking at project management, you can still think about those skills of actually getting to this point of becoming a fellow and all the steps you had to take to get here as being transferable to project planning and community development. Now, you will also be responsible in CSP, of course, for planning and implementing your follow-on community action project. So soon you will also be a project manager in this sense. This will include, of course, the assessing of what you want to do. Once you decide what you want to do, you will plan. Then you will move into the implementation stage. When you return back home, you will go through the measuring and assessing of your project. When you look at, did your project actually reach the results? You'll communicate this project back to your host organization and back to us at IREX next summer. So we will also be taking you through the life cycle of a project through your community action project. Now, why is developing skills in project management so important for your work as a community development professional? Project management is, of course, important in every field when we hope to accomplish certain projects. But as we discussed in orientation, you all have a really strong vision for what change you want to see in the world. The vision you have is not easy to achieve, as we all know. In order for you to inch closer to your vision, you do have to create that change. And this is what you're already doing and why you're here. You're passionate about change, whether it's environmental change, transparency and accountability, conflict resolution, or related to women and gender fields. So as we all know, how we create change is, of course, by having that dream, right? Having that end goal, but then also getting to action. So that includes planning. Nothing gets done without a very strong plan. Otherwise, your vision can remain as a dream and not be actualized. So project management is really effective planning. That is what we mean by project management, is being effective in your planning and then having impactful implementation. This is what you really need to strengthen the impact of your work. Now, let's talk a little bit about leadership styles. Take a moment and reflect. What leadership style do you think makes for the best project manager? So pause the video and reflect on that question, referring back to the session at orientation. So welcome back. Hopefully you reflected on this question. And as you might expect, the answer is that all leadership styles will make for the the best project manager. Like Deidre talked about in orientation, you will need to employ the different leadership styles at different times in the project management cycle. For example, there's many times where you will need to be the coaching style. Let's say you're focused on team morale and you notice some team members are very frustrated or not seeing the results they expected and may seem a bit disengaged. That's where you might need to exercise the coaching leadership style. Now, let's say you have a really tight deadline and your donor is counting on you. That's often when you might need to be more of the pace setter with leadership style. So we hope that you can practice exercising the different leadership styles along with the one that comes most naturally to you. So to put that all together, really, project management takes your vision to action to create the change you want to see and allows you to exercise all of the leadership styles. Now, to close this short video, review the resources below, share and respond to others in the forum, and then continue on to Module 3. Thank you.